Yes, Chris, it will be recorded, so we'll share it out. All right. Thank you all. I know you might hear those. Thank you so much for being here. My name is, I'm gonna get this link up for you. My name is Lisette Ostrander, and I am the Director of Education Programs at Beyond Differences. Thank you so much for being part of the Beyond Differences community. Today, I'm going to turn it over. We have Barbara Libby Steinman with us, who is going to talk to you about our Be Kind Online National Awareness Day, which is coming up this Friday, or not this Friday, next, is it this Friday? God, are we already? Just the time is flying. This Friday, the 13th. So Barbara Libby Steinman is going to talk about that. Barbara Libby is an artist and an educator and just has been an amazing part of our Beyond Differences community, has helped create great curriculum and art activities. And then after Barbara, I'm going to turn it over to Sally Matsuishi, who is our Director of National Youth Programs. And Sally is going to be talking about microaggressions, our lesson on microaggressions, and then how to come back from microaggressions. So Barbara Libby's part is about 15 minutes, and then Sally's part is about 25 minutes. So, all right, thank you. I'll be watching the chat for questions. Barbara.
Yay, thank you, Lisette, for this nice introduction, and welcome all. I am calling in from San Geronimo, a teeny tiny place in West Marin in California, and it's cold today, windy and cold. So thank you all for being here today. I'm excited to share my student leadership unit that I designed for the Be Kind Online Day, which is this Friday. So if you signed up, you have gotten this slide deck that I designed. And I just want to walk you through this lesson, and then you guys have some question time at the end. If people could put themselves on mute.
Yeah. And Barbara, if you could.
Yep, I'm going to present it. Thank you.
Perfect.
How is this? Good?
Perfect. Thank you.
Yay, thanks for letting me know. Okay, so here's the overview of the lesson. So it's called Student Leadership Lesson because we would love it if actually your student leaders on campus could teach this lesson, and you as the teacher, you would be the coach or the guide or the facilitator of this lesson. If you don't have that set up with student leaders, you would be teaching this lesson, right? So the way I designed this lesson, I was hoping to tap into students' interests already at that age. They love reading graphic novels, and they love cartoons and creating cartoons, that sort of thing. So this lesson taps into that interest of our students. And so I'm an art teacher. I teach elementary art, but I have taught middle school as well before, so I know that age group really well. And so I feel like the more we can do hands-on, and the more we can encourage kids to really do things with their hands and creatively, it gets them more engaged. And so this is what this lesson really allows our students to do. So this activity takes about 45 to 60 minutes, depending on how big of your groups are and how fast you want to go through this. It starts with essential questions, and I was really honing in on the idea that, well, I think as educators, we all are hoping that our students would not be on the social media platforms so much, but so be it. It is what it is. And I think we have to, as educators, work with that and teach them how to be kind online and how to be online and use these platforms, because they're not going away. They're going to be with us. And just like we teach our younger students how to say please and thank you and how to be kind that way, these social medias have started to pop up, these platforms popped up, but no one has actually really taught us how to use them or how to effectively use them and how to kindly use them. And so I think our students really need these tools and practice how to do that and how to be a kind, answering in a kind way, or what are we going to do if someone is not kind, right? So what are we going to do if someone has given us a unkind comment? So how are we going to respond to that? And so that's what this lesson is about. Now, I have taken it away from being online in a way, and we're practicing on paper. So this is what the fun about this activity really is. So we have a brainstorming outline that you can tap into with your students. And there are some tips for your students, sorry about that, to read through how to be kind online. On the left-hand column, you see that. And so after you have talked in a group or in as a whole class or in smaller groups about how to be kind online and tap into those essential questions, then you can introduce, or your student leaders will introduce, the online hero. What would an online hero look like? What good can an online hero do with social media platforms? What good could an online hero do globally, right? What are those global actions that a hero could do? And so I'm thinking you could do this on the board, just note-taking as a whole group, or students can note-take in their journals, whatever ways you have in place that you do that with your class. Then we're moving on to the actual activity. So I designed it so you don't need a lot of supplies. So this can be done in the slide deck. If you want students to work on their Chromebooks or whatever devices that they use, they can do this right in this template that I created. So this is on a Google slide, and from our distance learning time, I think students have gotten used to how to work with Google Slides. So they could write right into this profile and fill this out in here, or in your sign up, there's a template of that. And you can go ahead, it's a PDF, and you can go ahead and print that out and make copies for all of your students. And then they're going to fill it out in a hard copy. I'm holding it up here, a printout of it in my speaker window. So going back to the supplies, here are three examples that I created, and I just used color pencils and or markers or pencil, what have you, and then just really fun with going in with some colors and designing that profile. So they have a room to create a visual of the hero. What would that hero look like? And hero is a gender neutral term. So it could be whatever the student imagines it to be, this being, this hero. And then there's really a lot of deep thinking behind it. So what are the superpowers? What is the mission statement? The personal data, the tagline, which I thought was really intriguing. So it's kind of like a slogan, you know, like what is the slogan? What is this hero going to do in the world using a social media platform? you will see at the bottom in this bracket area right here, they can list 3 followers. And I think we sometimes need to explain that too, what that means, right? So if you have a follower, how does that work? And the handle of what the handle would be like. And it might be fun for them to list a follower of a friend and then someone that they usually don't interact a lot with. And so they're creating this on paper. So we're taking this away from a social media platform, which I think as teachers, this is a really safe way for us to model how to do and how to be online, right? And so everyone can participate, even those students who don't have, thank God, a social media account yet, but others who do have it, it gives them a different form and way to do this on paper. So once they have created this visual, then I'm envisioning that you are going to pin these up. Or students can come up and pin it up on a bulletin board, or you're going to do like a gallery view somewhere, or they can put this on the table, and then you're going to have them walk through and look at these amazing profiles and read through them. And something I also wanted to mention is for our ELLs, English learning students, this is a great way to model and maybe just writing down some phrases for them so that they can see, oh, this is how I could say a tagline, or this is how I could form a mission statement. And then it really allows them to practice in a safe way the language in that kind of playful way. So once students have had the time to look around and read some of their classmates' profiles, then they're going on to this next paper activity. It looks like this. This is the second template that you have in your sign up. And again, this is a PDF that you can run copies of. And so then the student will use this as a practice, how to respond to a online hero profile. So you can see I taped then the responses, so they fill it in. They put their own tagline, their own handle in there, and then you can model, how do I respond to a person? So, a profile. So they need to hone in on something that sparked their interest. For instance, I like that this hero is global cause is stopping cyberbullying. And this is something that I'm interested in. So what would my post look like? I love that you are stopping cyberbullying. How may I get involved, right? So they can ask a question or respond to something specific that the student wrote in their online hero profile. Then they cut that away with the scissors, or tear it away, and then they just take tape and stick it on there. So the idea is that students respond to each other and then kind of tape their responses below this student profile. And so then, depending on your time, how long you want to go for with this activity, you can say, okay, please respond to 2 or respond to 3. And then they have to go back and check their own profile, right? So, this is mine. I have a response. I have a question. And so then they take an extra little strip of paper and they respond back to that person. So it really is how it works online, but it's on paper. And it's a safe way to practice it. And it's also visual, so that then we can see, well, this student over here does not have any responses yet. So I'm going to write a response to that student so that we can be inclusive and everyone gets to practice and has this response right away. So we also included tips for responding here that you can like pre-teach this a little bit. So personalize your response and always thank the person. Thank you for noticing, da da da. And then respond to specific points. And again, I put a notice that the student has not gotten a response. So I'm going to write this peer response, be positive, ask questions, and answer questions. And lastly, I think this is also what us adults, we can practice this. What do you do? What and how do you respond if you have a negative comment, right? And maybe this is actually going to happen in your class. Maybe someone is actually making an unkind comment, and then take that as a teachable moment. How can we respond to that? And again, this is in a safe container because it's not going out into the world. So you can kind of, jump in as the teacher and go, oh, okay, well, here we had somebody saying something unkind. Now, how do we respond to that? And how do we work with that? Breathing is always a good tool, and kind of sit back and like, okay, maybe I'm not reacting right away. That sort of thing. And also, I think really pointing out as adults that students, if they do have that in real life, in a social media platform where they are getting a negative comment, I think it's important that we tell our students that they need to tell someone, right? So tell a trusted friend or tell an adult, hey, this is what happened. What do you think? What should I do? And not just let them, feel negative about themselves. And then lastly, once you have done this amazing project, please share. We would love to see your finished products, your students' products. And you can share with taking a photo, like of the whole wall that you guys did, or individual students, and then use the hashtag #BeKindOnline, and we would love to see what you all come up with. And I highly recommend that you fill one out yourself, like practice one, at your lunch break, and see the fun that you can have with it. And also, you might find out a little tweaks you might want to do because your group of kids that you're working with. So that's all from me.
Barbara, I just want to say too, and I put in the chat, Sally highlighted it for me, that there are a couple examples that we have online. So on Instagram at Beyond Differences. And Sally, you said that the teens made the example.
Members of the National Teen Board at Beyond Differences, which is a student leadership component that we have, and we have students from around the nation on the board, did the project together. And there's some terrific things. There's one about brown pride, about being Latinx, and the character is Chicano Batman. There's another one about trans man, done by a trans student that we have that beats back homophobia and protects those people who are marginalized. There's another one of an AAPI superhero who's stopping anti-Asian hate. So there's some really terrific examples that are available online. And there's another one that is about somebody who stops negative self-talk. And I thought that was a really terrific superhero who goes to other children and helps them stop negative self-talk. So those are available, and you can check them out, or you can print them out and use them as examples in your classroom.
So yeah, I just want to say, Julie says, love this. I'm in elementary school and we're dealing with this now. Rhonda says, I love these ideas. I just want to say, I just checked social media and I saw 2 examples. So I know.
I think they're rolling them out.
Okay, good. I just wanted to.
Yeah, and if I may interject real quick, just in
Yeah.
terms of tools that you guys can use, the AAPI example was done online on a computer. I mean, I don't know exactly what platform that artist had used. So just want to reiterate again that you could do it on the Google slide or whatever platform that your students are already comfortable using, or you could just go with the paper pencil task. It does not have to be color, but color is always fun. So it goes both ways, however you want to do it.
Perfect. Do we have any questions? And then we'll go to our next part. Does anyone have questions? And if so, you can also put them in the chat as we continue. And I'll make sure to put the link in the chat. Barbara, this is great. I love this idea. I'm gonna put the link in the chat. We started a couple minutes late, so I'm gonna move on to Sally. Barbara, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have fun on Friday.
Thank you. And just to let everyone know, this session goes till I'm Pacific time, 1:15, but we are gonna stay on for a few more minutes too for questions. We're gonna stay for the hour, even though we said it's 45 minutes. Okay, Sally.
Hi.
Thank you, Barbara.
Hi, my name is Sally Matsuishi, and I've been an educator for about 25 years, and I work specifically in doing positive identity formation and ethnic studies, as well as finding solutions for teachers to be able to create more inclusive environments. And so I'm honored and excited to be here because there's something I know about you. If you are a teacher here on your lunch break or after a long day of teaching, I honor you. It's teachers like you that make it so that we can create a new culture, post-pandemic culture, and we can help heal these children after what has happened. And it says a lot about you that you're in this room today. So I have a tremendous amount of gratitude. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about microaggressions. So I want to put a little bit of a trigger warning on here because I have taught this lesson out before, and it may bring up in you things, memories from childhood or memories from things that happened this afternoon to you. And I want to be able to be in the space together, talking about microaggressions and finding solutions on how we heal ourselves and the community from them. And I'm going to start by just basically talking about what microaggressions are. Okay, so microaggressions actually have a definition by this Dr. Darrell Zhu out at Columbia. And he says they are everyday slights, indignities, put downs, and insults that people of color, women, LGBTQ plus populations, or those who are marginalized experience in their everyday day-to-day interactions with people. So it's different than just rudeness. Not that rudeness is not, harmful and hurtful. This actually has to do with specific things that are connected to race, class, gender, sexuality, ability, and things in our culture that marginalize students. And so, and oftentimes they just sort of float by, or they're in the air, or you hear over here somewhere. And where it often takes place is online. Little tiny things, big and small. And the thing is they feel small to some people or like nothing to some people. And to other people, it's extremely painful and isolating and harmful to them. What I like to say is they're small but powerful. So let me give you some examples. So these examples are from the National Team Board, who I work with pretty regularly, about microaggressions that they have encountered online within the last 6 months. One of them is, I'm fine with you being gay or people being gay, but, and then a long explanation. Or, you're the whitest Mexican I know. Or, he probably won because they wanted someone Black to win. Or, you know how boys are. And lastly, Arabic, I'm sorry, just sounds scary. These are microaggressions. These are things that have been floated out in the air online that are like arrows to the populations are hearing. And I want to stress that it doesn't just harm the people for whom they're directed at. Unchecked, it can actually harm the whole community because it makes a feeling of unsafety. And it makes a feeling that who I am or what I represent or what I believe is not acceptable here. It's either lesser or not valued, or something that can be judged in a way, and it's going through a judgment lens that is not inclusive of everyone. So this can lead to feelings of social isolation, deep feelings of social isolations, pain, paranoia, anger, rage. It comes out as becoming withdrawn. It also can come out as acting out. There are a lot of places for which the harm of microaggressions can play itself out in your classroom. Okay, so the biggest thing it does is that it erodes a culture of belonging, and it silences voices that you need to be heard, because we want all of those voices being in that place where they can bounce ideas off of each other and really engage one another. Okay, so why am I talking about on Be Kind Online Day? There were these students, these Black students at Harvard, who created this social media account called I Too Am Harvard. And they started just listing out day-to-day microaggressions that they were facing at Harvard. And because it was at this elite education institution where people thought things like this didn't happen, well, some people thought things didn't happen, right? And they gave voice to it, and they've started a conversation about this practice of these online sites went viral, and the conversation about microaggressions went viral. So not only are these microaggressions existing online and hurting our children online, but there is actually a pretty large counter movement about them, and the conversation was born. So what we did is we created this lesson that honors both of those parts. How do we get a hold and heal communities after microaggressions, and how do we talk to them and about them and lay them bare and put them out on the table so that we can engage a conversation about them? And I want to shout out to the Black community who really put themselves out there and really, really gave this light and allowed us to be able to talk about this further. And they will continue to do so. And we have a lot to thank the Black community for doing this for so long. So when we're talking about microaggressions, what do we want to do first? As teachers, and all teachers do this, so I don't even have to tell you to do this, but you got to do the work with yourself first. Where do your unconscious biases lay? And what's happening in our community? Which stakeholders could I talk to? Which students could I engage about this so I know what's happening in our community? How do we start talking about these things? It's before the first thing we have to do is start talking about them, right? So what you're going to find when you start having these conversations or start engaging this lesson that we will provide to you and you can get from our website is that you're going to find that some people think it doesn't exist and other people feel very, very, very hurt by it. And there's that interesting place. There's that liminal space that you can jump into and start having these conversations, that place in between, because it's a really clear disconnect. And when your students can see the disconnect, then they can engage it and be in that moment. So it's going to be itchy. I'm not saying it's not going to be itchy. It's going to be a little uncomfortable, but as teachers, we are always in those places, right? And for me as an educator, if I'm in an itchy place, if I'm in a place that's a little bit uncomfortable, I'm working with kids who are not unsure, I know I'm in the right place. I know I'm where I need to be in terms of social emotional learning, because this is where I can really guide that space, where I can model the behavior that I want to see going forward. Okay, so I call out itchy, by the way. Notice I use the word itchy, right? Itchy's uncomfortable, itchy's, but it's not going to kill you, right? We're going to end in this itchy space, and I call it out when I see it. When kids start feeling a little bit uncomfortable, I see it, and then I use I statements. I see that you're feeling this way. I see, am I getting that right? Can you articulate to me how that feels? Let me tell you how I feel in this moment. And so that I can be in that space with them. I use 3 Ps, which are praise, patience, and power. So what I'm doing is I'm going to praise, hey, I'm really proud of us that we're in this moment together. I'm really proud of us that we're talking about this. Or, hey, I'm just so excited by what you're saying right now. Give me more in that space. Praise, patience. When you hear something, I'm going to give the benefit. I'm going to let it out. Okay, I'm hearing something. I'm not sure where you're going with this. Let's keep going. Let's hear this, right? Or I can see how you might be feeling, but what if we considered another idea, this patience piece, and then power. As a teacher, you always have a power in that classroom. How are you going to share it? Who are you going to give it to? How are you going to broker that power in your classroom to be able to uplift the harm and be able to educate those who have perpetrated harm on others? There's a lot of language and talking tips and all kinds of teaching tips in this lesson that I put in there so you can be in this moment. So all of these things that I'm saying and more are in the lesson, and you can access that online. So once we start doing this, what are we doing? We are, the lesson gives you a bunch of worksheets that have common microaggressions on them. It gives you the basis of the root of that, of those microaggressions. So in other words, I have the one, Arabic just sounds scary, right? And that's deeply rooted in this idea that English, standard spoken English is beautiful, that the sound of other languages are foreign or wrong. And so we want to really call that out, right? And how do we come to understand, and how do we come to break down this idea of what is scary and what's not? And we're going to start looking at that. I always want to center the harmed in a conversation around microaggressions and not the perpetrator. And I always want to look at the root of the microaggression, because that is what's going to enable us to dismantle them and take it apart. So what the lesson does is you get a series of microaggressions. I provide to you all the history behind them. I provide for you talking points on how to dismantle them. But what we're really doing is to do it with students. You can do this in two ways. You can either do it as something's happened and we're going to heal the community, or you could do it preventively. What would we do if we heard something like this? How will we respond to it? How will we break this down, right? So all of those pieces are there. You can put the microaggression up on the board and talk about the feelings around it, talk about the history about it, talk about what could have prevented it. So we lay it bare, just like the Black students at Harvard did so well, that we're going to actually talk about what was said, right? And we're going to see the origins of where this pain comes from. So I broke down a bunch of different microaggressions, and they're on these worksheets, and you can use them in your classrooms. So, and then when we do these exercises, and after we do them, we have a reflection and a journaling prompts there as well for you to be able to give those students after these lessons that space to sort of process. Okay.
Sally, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Someone wrote, Rhonda wrote, so right when the microaggression happens?
Yeah, so I'm always very much aware of Dr. Martin Luther King. The idea is, in the end, what we will remember is not the words of our enemies, but it's the silence of our friends. I'm always really drawn to that quotation around microaggressions, because microaggressions go by so fast. But in those moments, it's better to nip it in the bud, even if you have to table it for later. It's like, oh my goodness, I just heard something that's deeply troubling to me. Let's finish this lesson, but I'm definitely going to get back to you if you don't have time in that moment to deal with it. If not, if you have an advisory period, or there are schools that have had very large crisis happen in their schools, and they'll take an afternoon to break these things down. But even if you only have 15 seconds and you hear something, always, I encourage you to call it out, because those who are harmed and those who have heard it and are already worried about their place in this culture, it's important that they hear you catch it and say you're going to come back to it, and then use our lessons to be able to come back to it in an effective way. Okay, so let's talk about restorative justice, because I know I don't have that much time. Lisa, how much time do I have left?
So we have 8 minutes, but then we are going to stay the 15 minutes over.
I can do it.
Anyone?
So what do we do when it happens? I'm getting into what it's going to do. I always want to take that moment. I always want my class to see that I heard it. I always want my students, especially the harmed, to know that I caught it, and that I'm going to do something about it, that they won't have to sit in the silence of their friends. And then I'm going to break it down. I'm going to call in all the different people, and I'm going to discuss with them. I'm going to do really modeling all that listening, that active listening. And the question is what would help you feel restored, right? And I'm always going to start with the harmed first. I'm always going to center the harmed, the culture, and the third person is always the perpetrator. So often in cultures, all the attention is given to the person who did the thing, and it leaves all the other people off to the side. But I always want to do to center the harmed first. And I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to always think, what is the impact more than the intent, right? The impact on these students than the intent of the perpetrator, right? And I'm going to be in this space, and I'm going to be listening. And then I'm going to go to the person who caused the harm. And I'm going to listen to them, but I'm always going to try and bring them back to the understanding of the impact of their words. I'm not going to go really long in justifying behavior or telling the harmed how they should act or being dismissive of them. I'm going to always be able to articulate it to the perpetrator what the harm was, how it felt, and what we're going to do to come back to this community, right? What are we going to do to make it so it's safe for everybody and safe for you to come back? So here are some of the things that are commonly heard when you start talking to people about microaggressions they have committed. They say things like, why are they making this about race? Or why are they making this about them being a girl? Or why are they making it is blaming the victim, right? Somehow the victim is reacting to me wrong. We have to always reframe this and say, wait a minute, right? They are telling you that you have hurt them, right? What are you going to do to come back from this? They are not doing anything to you, right? Okay. The other one, it's just a joke, right? It's no big deal. That is the perpetrator's vision of this. Again, you want to reframe and always talk about the impact of what has happened, whether they thought it was a joke or not. And clearly somebody else didn't think it was funny. That's not what I meant. You know what I meant. Well, that may be clear, but again, we're going to always go back into those impact statement. This idea of other people have said way worse things than me. That's a deflection, right? That's trying to go over here. And again, we always want to come back. These things are not going to help in this moment. I want to find, as a teacher, I want to find ways that you and I can come up with that will make it so that you can heal the harm that you've done and come back into this community so people can feel safe and they can trust you again. How are we going to get to that space? I'm going to help you do that, right? And then there's also the very common eye rolling, shrugging, sighing, the nonverbal reactions. And I always say, you know, when people see this, when people see you roll their eyes, they think that you don't take it seriously, or they think that you don't care about them, or so that you're interpreting for them, because they may not know how people say it. Because they'll say, well, I didn't say anything. Yes, but those body language people do interpret them. Okay, so then you're going to sit and you're going to make a restoration plan. So you're going to you've talked to the harmed, you talk to the perpetrator, you're going to come to a certain amount of agreement, right, of what's going to happen. The perpetrator, by the way, cannot after this be like, well, fine, I did it. Why are you still mad at me? The harmed earner no obligation to feel super safe around that person because the person agreed to this plan. It's an earn back, right? And so you have to say it's going to take time, and it may never happen. People may never feel super completely safe around you, but I think they will value what you're doing, and we'll check back in with them and we'll see. And this check back and this being in this space makes it so the harmed and the culture, not just the one person, but the entire culture is like, look at this kid made a commitment to this is how we're going to heal this community. And this is we're going to check in and we're going to see how this works. And we're going to evolve past this. We're going to try to, but it's up to you continuing to talk, continue to be in this moment with me, continuing to tell us how you feel that this is going to heal. So then I always want to do is take it away from the two people in the room. Yes, there were two people in the room and these things happen and they were horrible and we have a plan, but let's look at where these ideas come from. Where does the idea that he only won the award because he's Black come from? What is the root of that very toxic idea, right? That all awards are actually supposed to go to the members of the dominant culture, right? Cis, white, male, privileged, and anybody who doesn't fit that, are we to say that they took that award from somebody else? Where does that idea come from? How do we come to understand that belief that when a person of color or a queer person or a woman or a disabled person wins something or gets lauded or earns a privilege or earns accolades, that somehow it only happened because of their marginalized status? Where does that come from? How do we break that down And how do we dismantle that in our community? Because that's not going to help anybody. When we start talking about that too, it gives the whole culture and the whole community the ability to see that they're participating in a larger world. And they have roles and the ability and the agency to change that, right? If I understand it, then I can change it. If I can point it out and I can say that that's wrong, I change that. And that gives young people the ability to be powerful in their worlds. And once your kids start pointing out microaggressions, by the way, once you start teaching these things, they'll start pointing it out, right? All over. I once did a whole lesson on why boys will be boys is an incredibly, idiotic idea, right? And how it harms both women, the greater culture, and boys. And then I later on heard in the, out on a field, someone say boys will be boys, and students just pointing that out and telling them that's wrong, and how good they felt about that. And that's the place that I want to be, to give them the agency to do that. So I think that there's once we challenge these roots of microaggressions, right? We're in that really juicy liberation curriculum, right? We're in that space of where we can change the culture of our classrooms and where we can give those marginalized voices the ability to be their authentic self, where we can end that sense of isolation, or maybe that they don't feel that they could be those people in the spaces and in their schools, and find joy in that. Not just them, but everybody can find joy in this culture of belonging. So that is, I had to do this really fast. The really quick way of doing this. I will stay after if anybody wants to talk to me about this. I also, in the lessons, there's preventative measures of how you can stop microaggressions from happening. The simple act of saying, if everybody in the room who comes into a room, whenever they introduce themselves, says their pronouns, it then takes the burden of trans and non-binary people from having to say their pronouns and be the odd man out. We just have a culture in which we have pronouns. We say pronouns, and they don't have to then carry the burden of that, and they shouldn't. And so I wanted to end because I realized that you're the ones that show up, and there's a power to you, and you're a pre-selected group of the people who show up. And I wanted to say this beyond my gratitude for doing this. This is a tough lesson. And I loved making it, and I loved working in the space, and I love hearing from teachers, and I love getting into the meat in those itchy spaces and trying to find solutions. Those of you who are in this room today, there's a long line of teachers, right, that made social change in this country. The slave teachers in the night who taught kids to read, Black children to read, even though they could die for it. There were then the Black teachers who in the Black Southern civil rights movement who, started the majority of the people who were in jail in the American civil rights movement in the South. The average age was 14, and they were mostly led by teachers, and it changed the nature of how schooling works in this country. The LA walkouts, right? Where the Latinos were the largest group. Walkouts in the country was one of the largest civil disobedience acts in the history of this country. Was led and organized by Latinx teachers, namely Sal Castro. And the reason why we can have bilingual education in the United States was because of a teacher in San Francisco, Chinatown. And she spearheaded a case that went to the Supreme Court called Nichols versus Lau, which enabled bilingual education across the nation. Teachers are the ones who always were in these spaces saying, but wait a minute, and defending the rights of the marginalized children in their classrooms. And because you came to the microaggressions class today, you are among those teachers. And for that, I say thank you. And I couldn't be more honored to be with you here today. That's it.
Perfect. I think we're gonna, Sally, thank you so much. I'm just reading the chat. We have some, thank you, and so appreciate the time spent here. Thanks. Glenna says, thanks for bringing this to the classroom. Julie says, thanks so much. We are gonna stay on till 1:30 our time, Pacific, 4:30 Eastern. So for the next 12 minutes. So if you have questions, comments, we'll be here. Connie says, thank you. Thank you, Connie.
My dogs didn't bark once that whole time.
Thank you, Rebecca. Sally, when you were pilot testing this, I'm just curious, just some of the
Oh,
feedback.
it was kind of rowdy. I really loved it. Kids had all kinds of things to say, things that they had heard, wanted questions about why do people believe this or where does it come from? And there was a lot of aha moments like, oh, what? Like, whoa, I didn't realize that's why, right? And a lot of things that people had known that it was hurtful, but they couldn't articulate in the moment. That's the problem with microaggressions, right? People say something to you and then you're like, oh, wait, I don't know what to say, or I know that's wrong, but I don't know what to do. And so I was just trying to give young people the ability to proactively be able to talk about these things, but also to do it in a fashion that was productive, right? And also I wanted for ways for people to come back from these things, because a lot of times so many of them have happened, nobody said anything, and you have these classrooms that are carrying the weight of all this. And I was looking for ways for them to be able to dismantle it and be able to engage again.
Awesome. Thank you. Rhonda, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I have a couple. I really appreciate this content. We're working in our elementary school a lot on microaggressions, and it's tricky, more so I would say with our 6th grade. They're the top of our elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we've been talking about too, actually, one is like when you bring it up, we get nervous to bring it up in front of the students who the comment was made towards.
Mm-hmm.
So, and because we don't want them to feel more uncomfortable. But you made that quote about that Martin Luther King stated about when people, you know, the quote.
Yeah.
And so that just like gave me the chills, because that's kind of what I needed to hear. And, to, get past that discomfort of, bringing that up right then. And then it normalizes it. Like, this is what we do. We talk about these things. We don't stuff them under. So thank you for that. And then the other thing was like kids, I've noticed more frequently, and I've been just wrestling with it in my mind. How do we talk about, or how do we support kids with like autism and ADHD and kids who maybe are obese, or, who get these comments made? And we're struggling with that in our school too. Like, do we create an atmosphere where we bring that up right then as well? Like as it's a micro. Does that make sense?
No, it totally does. And I'm so excited that you say that, because Raina and I are working on an ableism and neurodifference curriculum right now of how to make inclusive environments for kids who are on a spectrum. But here's where it is. I always like, in answering your question, to start from the historical standpoint. So I'm not looking at the school or 2 specific kids or something like that. I like to start from that place of dismantling ableism and looking at what does neurodifference mean? What's the history of ableism in this country? And the fact that everybody's on a spectrum, right? That's the glory of the word spectrum, right? And so, and being able to respect and be inclusive of all of those people on that spectrum. You also brought up obesity. There's just a long history of body image and how we see and include people also on that spectrum, right? And I do a lesson that sort of breaks down what is beautiful and what has been seen throughout all cultures all over the world throughout time. There certainly isn't one way of doing it. And the idea that there's power being held by people who are dictating one certain idea is always dangerous. And I also compare that to other places. Where other problems have we seen because one group of people are dictating that one thing is right, or one way of being is perfect, or one way is beautiful, or one way is smart, or one way is acceptable and another is not. When you start breaking that down in sort of a more abstract or in a historical or in a cultural aspect, then you can help those kids make those connections through what's happening in the cultures of their own schools. And actually it becomes very empowering when they see it themselves. So I always start from that piece. So I'm not calling out some kid, or I'm not making a group feel uncomfortable. I'm looking at all kinds of stuff. I'm really getting into the, like, let's talk about this. Let's think about this. Where else does this apply? I can look at things from other marginalized group and say, well, where else do we see this? Who else is also marginalized by the same idea of there's only one way or there's one ideal? And then I'm able to break it down. It also makes allyship when I do a larger idea about this larger cultural idea of like what's perfect or what's good or what's iconic, right? When I do that, then members of different communities become allies to each other and one another in those spaces. So we do have worksheets that have a lot of these different things on it. And we don't have like, here's the Black one, and here's the Asian one, and here's the queer one, right? They're actually all integrated so that you can actually start breaking down the systems that create these things. I hope I answered your question. Okay, terrific.
Sally, a comment and then 2 questions.
Sure.
Dahlia says, this is going to help so much. I have 5th graders calling each other or asking other students if they are gay and lesbian. And we discuss, and when we discuss what they will say, I was just asking, I didn't mean anything by it. So that's a comment. And I just, not to rush through that, but we have 2 questions. One is, what's your advice on reaching the parent community about this? And the other, which is a different, but I just want to, do you have a method idea about a restorative plan to bring the offender back in? So first question, advice on reaching to the parent community.
Okay, parent communities are always tricky, right? Because their focus is never going to be on the harmed so much. It's their kid getting canceled. Every time I've ever gone to a parent meeting where we're talking about microaggressions, there's always this a certain amount of defensiveness and fragility about what happens. I don't want my kid's life to be ruined because he said something stupid on the schoolyard today, right? Again, I'm always wanting to reframe that and look at the impact. And I always want to talk to parents about, I'm looking for ways to make this community safe again. I'm looking for ways to integrate your child back in so people feel safe around them. I want to find ways that your child can communicate how they're feeling without harming others. How can we do that, right? I'm going to always go from that point of view of being supportive and helpful, but centering the harmed. And I'm not also going to talk about intent so much as I'm going to talk about impact. And as I always am going to be modeling that space. There's also, parent meetings go one way. It's either the overprotection of the perpetrator, or it's a bunch of the harmed coming out saying, what are you going to do about this? This is happening all over the place. And what are you going to do? Right. And then that is, again, listening. What do you need to be restored? What you feel needs to happen for us to be able to make this a safe environment again? What do we need to be teaching? What needs to be in all of our curriculums? What needs to be in our social emotional? What do you feel will help the situation? By asking them to be a part of the solution of giving their advice and being in that space and looking at that impact, and then working with perpetrators is the best way I've worked with parents to get through these things, especially after when there is a crisis. I am very careful not to get in huge shouting matches, because then you actually make more harm, right? But I do want to have that space where the school or the teacher has control of the plan that we are making, and that people are being heard, but that the culture and the children in there, that's what is most important of reestablishing and making safe again. Okay, I think I answered that. What's the next one? Is there another one I should?
The one was a plan for bringing back the, do you have a method idea about a restorative plan to bring the offender back in?
Yeah, if you look at the lesson plan, it is written out in there. Offenders are you want to be in that space for them, because there's a mixture of feelings, defensiveness, fragility, and also shame and guilt, and feeling like no one's going to ever like them again. And they get hurt themselves. And I also want to acknowledge that. I want them to be able to articulate all of the feelings they're having, right? The first ones that come out are going to be not so great. It's always like, why can't they take a joke, or, but the other ones is like, well, how do you feel? What are you worried about? What do you think is going to happen when you go back into that room? Or what do you think it's going to be like tomorrow? And you'll hear a lot, they're going to hate me forever. right? Or, there are all of these things, and those are very real feelings. And I've tried to parse those out. Then my next step is like, okay, how are we going to make people feel safe? What can you do? Like, and a lot of it is I teach kids how to listen, right? One of the things that you could do is you can apologize, but more than just being like, sorry, and rolling your eyes and like walking away. But it's like, I did this thing. I want to hear how that made you feel. And then having them actively listen, not listening, eye rolling, but actively listening. I usually tell kids, I want you to listen so carefully that you can have at least 2 or 3 other questions you want to ask them about what they just said, right? Because you can't ask questions if you weren't listening, right? I want to know more about that. I see that now, right? And then you want to teach that kid of how to make a commitment to healing again. I will use the going around and asking people about their sexuality is one I hear kind of often, because it seems harmless, but I always say, do you hear adults running around asking people about their sexuality? Also, are you running around and asking the sexuality of people who you assume are straight? All of this is, it's not something that we do. And also, by the way, it is my belief that it's fluid and it can change at any time. So whatever you were then or were later, and a kid has also the right to not know in that moment. And when you start asking these questions, you're forcing people to put themselves in boxes that they may not want to be in. So I always say, hey, okay, this is again a good preventative measure, that like if you can get ahead of this problem, because it happens all the time, and start talking about the history of homophobia in the United States. Why people's sexuality and why the queer community has often been either forced to stay closeted or forced to tell everybody. And what does that mean? And what does that mean to that community? When you're doing that, what does it make them feel about the whole rest of their identities? Are we missing all the great artists, Chicana, proud daughter of a single mom, is a math whiz? Are we just going to label something, right? It doesn't allow somebody to have a full explanation of their identities. And we're going to talk about that a lot in those things. But in terms of like how I would help kids come back from that, I would do a lot with the people who cause the harm, understanding that they may not have intended to cause harm, but explaining to them how they have, and also that where that idea comes from. Right. So I understand we come from a culture in which there is homophobia, and that maybe this culture made it so you were led to believe that that was an okay thing to do. But what we're going to do now is we're going to figure out how to combat that. We're going to figure out how to make it safe for queer people in our community. And we're going to figure out all the different identities that exist in everyone. And we're going to be and celebrate those things. But you and I, we're going to figure out how we're going to undo this. So it gives them a little place to put, because obviously there is some blame to be put on the culture of homophobia in the United States, right? And then also, how do they work their way back? How are we going to listen? And how are we going to find ways to make it okay again? So that's my answer to that. It's easier for me. I wish actually that, I saw a master teacher deal with this exact problem. And I learned from him how transformative these moments can be if you jump on them and you deal with them well, how you can change the way the child sees not only their world, but their place in it. And also that you can give them the skills to actually start dismantling things. And what I saw from that teacher, he actually turned a perpetrator into somebody who is actively trying to break down stereotypes and became a defender and an incredible ally in their classroom. So I think in these moments, and we're not always going to get them right, and we're not expected to always get them right, but in these moments, if we can be in there and engage, I think it's terrific.
Sally, well, thank you so much. Let me just see, and then, yeah, thank you. Rhonda, just some comments. Laura says, thanks, I like that focus on the impact. Rhonda's like, can you just come into our classrooms?
I'd love to.
Yeah, it isn't always comfortable to talk so beautifully. Yeah, thank you for modeling. I agree, Rhonda. I think that's why we need to be coming together more to have these conversations and be guided by people like
And
Sally.
make
Yeah.
professional development around how to have these conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, Julie, this has been very powerful and I really appreciate you doing this. Thanks so much. We are at time, but I do think this is something that we will do more
Thank
of.
you all
Yeah.
for coming. I love the questions. And you can always, email me if you have other ones and I'll try my best to figure it out with you.
Thank you. I'm gonna-
Here, bye-bye.